Good evening. And welcome. And thank you, Jay. What an idea. Here's an idea. I am making my life fabulous. That's great. And thank you, Alex, too, for covering music tonight. And welcome, everybody, to B26. Gate B26. You ready to fly? Yeah. You have your boarding pass? Yeah. You ready to go? Yes. Let's go. Traveling. You know, there's an ancient proverb that says, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. And the second best time to plant a tree is right now. Right now. Because in this moment, right now, we have the opportunity to plant powerful seeds in consciousness that will move us in the direction that we wish to travel in. Because we're always traveling, aren't we? We're always on the move. Our life is a journey, and the destination is the journey. It's not about getting someplace, it's about the actual journey. We're always moving, but the question is, in what direction? Are we moving towards the truth, or are we moving away from the truth? One of Dr. Holmes's most well-quoted statements is, in treatment, we must turn entirely away from the condition. In treatment, we turn entirely away from the condition. And we're often asked if this means that we deny that these conditions exist. You know, what about my back pain? What about cancer? What about my checkbook? What about relationships? Well, the science of mind teaches that we don't deny the human experiences of disease or pain or other conditions, but we maintain that they're primarily a thing of thought. And that goes back to Phineas Quimby, who is often called the father of New Thought. He said that illness was simply the result of incorrect thinking. Incorrect thinking that we could replace with truth. So we experience these conditions, but they're primarily things of thought. So if we turn entirely away from the condition, what are we turning to? Where do we turn? 2 Sundays ago, you may remember that it was a very rainy Sunday. It was very, very rainy. And we were coming home, Jesse and Tyler and Sharon and I, we were coming home from the Assistance League Theater, and we're on the Hollywood Freeway around Victory over here. And it was still raining, but it had slowed down a bit. And we're in the carpool lane, and all of a sudden, we hit a puddle. A very, very deep puddle, and we were going about 60 miles an hour, and all of a sudden the water came up and over the windshield and completely obscured our front vision, and then it came over the sides and completely obscured our side vision. And as I was looking out the rearview mirror, and then it obscured the rear view, and I had just a glimpse of what was happening behind me to see that I had a couple of lanes clear, and then it covered the rear too. And as I hit the brake softly, I still felt the car start to skid a little bit, which I quickly corrected. And I knew that I had to get out of the carpool lane because I had that wall, you know, a foot to the left of me, and I couldn't see where I was going. Absolutely blind. And I had to get over to the right, and I couldn't see anything. And I had to trust that all was well. And I had to also trust that I knew what to do. And then I turned right and drove blind into the next lane over. I had to trust Spirit that everything would be okay, and I had to trust myself that I would know what to do and that I would do it correctly. Dr. Holmes writes, we should always turn to the living presence within. Recognize it as the one and only power in the universe. Unify with it and declare our word to be the presence, power, and activity of this one. This is why we study the science of mind. We practice the presence of God, the Christ consciousness. We do our spiritual practice so that when we skid, we know what to do. The title of my talk this evening is Turn into the Skid. Turn into the skid. How many of you have heard that phrase before? Turn in the direction of the skid. Do you know which way that is? No. When you skid? Because the first time I had a major skid, I didn't know what it meant. I had heard it. I thought I knew what it meant, but I didn't know. Well, I looked it up. If a car is moving across snow or ice or water in any direction other than the direction which it's pointed, it's skidding. So that means you're on the freeway, here we are on the 101, and the car is pointed this way, and we're traveling this way, we're not skidding. If the car's pointed this way, but we're traveling this way, we're skidding. Okay? And how you get out of that is you turn into the direction of the skid. Specifically, that means you align your tires with the direction of your intended travel, and then as your vehicle turns back into the direction it was originally going, you may have to counter-correct a little so that you don't oversteer and create a new skid. But I found out what this means in completely the wrong way about 25 years ago in pretty much exactly the same spot that this happened 2 Sundays ago. Well, not exactly the same spot. I was coming up the Hollywood freeway by Universal Studios, and it was about 11 o'clock on a weekday morning, and I was driving from Hollywood to Van Nuys, so I had to get onto the 101, and you know how there right by Universal Studios, there's 3 lanes that go to the 101 that end up going west to Van Nuys, and then there's 2 lanes on the left, that's the 170 that continues straight this way, and comes up this way. So there used to be, I don't know if there still is, but I think they took it down for this reason. There used to be a Lancashire on-ramp. There is still one at Universal Studios, but this one was right by where the split goes 3 this way and 2 this way. And I was driving to get on the 101 to go to Van Nuys to a meeting, and right then a motorcycle got on right at that Lancashire on-ramp, and he was going for that 170, and he cut right by me, and in a reflex, I turned, and it was wet, and I started to skid. So remember, I was facing this way, and now my car's facing this way, but it's going this way. So I was in a skid, and I thought to myself, turn in the direction of the skid. Only I had no idea what that meant, and I thought, I'm skidding this way, so I turned. And as I went around 400 degrees, there's the wall, there's Carl's Jr., there's the Armenian church, there's 5 lanes of the 101 with people looking at me like this. And then there's the Sheraton and the Hilton and Universal Studios, and then there's that entrance, and then there's... So I made it all the way around to about 10 o'clock, and I was driving a stick shift, and I had my foot off the clutch, and it died. And I'm in the middle of the... And cars are pulling up and stopping all around me, and everybody's like rolling down their windows, are you okay? Are you okay? And just at that second, a CHP guy pulled up, and he said, are you all right? And I said, I'm okay. And then he sped off up the 170, ostensibly, I think, to get the guy on the motorcycle. But you see, I didn't know what turn in the direction of the skid meant, and I did the exact wrong thing. I was really on purpose about it, but it was wrong. I was completely ignorant. The question is, though, when you skid in life, when you're not moving in the direction that you think you're pointed in, then what do? Well, you have to set your wheels aright by turning in the direction that you want to go in. And the way to do that means turning to Spirit. As Dr. Holmes said, turning to that presence within, that power within you. Because to Spirit, skid isn't just a word. It's a divine invitation. S-K-I-D. Spirit knows its direction at all times. Spirit knows its direction. We should always turn to that living presence within, recognize it as the one and only power in the universe, unify with it, and declare our word to be the power, presence, and activity of this one. Now, turning to the power within us is what we call spiritual practice. This is how we exercise the Christ consciousness in our lives, by practicing the presence of God, by knowing that divine intelligence knows what it's doing. S-K-I-D. Spirit knows its direction. Now, if you look up skid in the dictionary, you'll find it comes from an old Norse word, Norse, skith. S-K-I-T-H, skith, which means ski, to ski. And skids are also the names of those ski-like things like on the bottom of a helicopter. You know, when a helicopter lands, they say heavy on the skids, and when it takes off, they say light on the skids. But I always wondered about the other usage. Jamie and I were talking about this on Sunday night when we were having dinner. Skid row, where did that come from? So I looked it up. In the 19th century, in logging camps in the Northwest, the camp would have a road that went down to the river that was called Skid Road. And the loggers would put these skids on the road so that they could roll the logs down to the river so that the logs could float downstream. So they called it the Skid Road. And because of the skids that were always in the middle of the road, it wasn't good for horse travel, and in fact, it wasn't a good place to have a business at all. So they became the low-rent district where flop houses and dive bars were, and ultimately the synonymous place where the homeless or those who are down on their luck ended up going, the low-rent district, Skid Row. That's what it became called. Skid Row, I know. So a friend of mine, Dr. Mitch Johnson, who's the spiritual leader of the Nashville Center for Spiritual Living, he tells a great story about a congregant who keeps coming in for spiritual counseling and keeps telling the same story over and over and over again. And finally, at the end of the hour, Dr. Mitch looks at his watch and says, "Okay, let's pray." And the woman rolls her eyes and clears her throat and says, "My God, has it come to that? Do we have to pray? You're coming to a Science of Mind minister. What do you think's going to happen? Do we have to pray?" In Science of Mind, we say, change your thinking and change your life. And we say, between God and me, there's no between. And here at NoHo on Sundays, we sing, I see God in everything. God, 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 God. So why is it such a surprise that we should pray? And why is it such a leap to pray? Maybe it's just because we don't practice. Maybe we just don't practice enough. It's just not comfortable. In the Science of Mind, our two main tools of spiritual practice are meditation and spiritual mind treatment, our affirmative prayer. And I hear it all the time. I don't know how to meditate. Don't you hear that, Nancy? I don't know how to meditate. Teach me how to meditate. I have no idea how. I sit there and I'm thinking things. I'm not meditating. And I can't treat, oh, all you practitioners, you say such fabulous things. I can't do that. The words never come. Well, let me tell you something. It's not about the words. It's about the feeling. Treatment is not about the wonderful word. In fact, I've heard a lot of treatments that had a lot of words in them that I did not connect with. It's not about the words. In fact, the definition of spiritual mind treatment is the time, the process, and the method necessary to the changing of our thought. Treatment clears the thought of negation, of fear and doubt, and it reminds us of the ever-presence of God. That's the part I like. It reminds us of it sounds good, doesn't it? It reminds us of the ever-presence of God. It sounds great, and you know what? It is great. It's great. Meditation and treatment give us the opportunity to practice acknowledging our relationship with the divine. We're spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe governed by our use of this thing called cause and effect, this spiritual law, and nothing can change that relationship. God is always expressing itself through us. We are always individualizing it in our lives. We're always individualizing this power. Nothing can change that truth, but it sure does feel better when we're conscious of it, doesn't it? No matter where we go, no matter what we're doing, that's what's happening. And let me tell you, turning to God comes a lot easier in a car skidding down the Hollywood freeway at 60 miles an hour when you can't see out the windows. Oh God is like the first thing that comes to your mind. And yet, we have other experiences in our lives that we wish we didn't have, don't we? It doesn't have to just be driving down the Hollywood freeway completely blind at 60 miles an hour. Dr. Holmes writes, trained thought is far more powerful than untrained thought. But who's going to train your thought if you don't? Who's going to train your thought to turn to God if you don't do it? The dictionary defines to train as to teach a particular skill or a type of behavior through practice and instruction over a period of time. Doing it once is not training. Jay, he's getting ready for something. Doing it once is not training. It's over a period of time. We come here to study Science of Mind, this practical spirituality, ostensibly to have a better, happier, more productive life. We say, oh, it's simple. Science of Mind teaches two things. It teaches that God is all there is, and it teaches that we live in a cause and effect universe. And we hear this all the time. But where the rubber really hits the road and sometimes skids is practicing. So that when something unexpected happens, we're ready. You know, I never get up on this stage without practicing first. Even if it's doing a Wednesday night service where I've done the music a zillion times, when it's Sunday, the NoHo Arts Band is a great band. We never perform without practicing first. It makes for a much better experience for you and for us. Much more enjoyable. No surprises. No surprises. Oh. Why we study this spiritual science, proven time and time again to work as advertised. Why do we do it if we're not really willing to practice using these tools and become proficient with them before we need them? Before we need them. It's like CPR. You know, you have to know how to do it before somebody has a heart attack. And just having heard the words Heimlich maneuver does not teach you how to do it. You have to actually learn how to do the Heimlich maneuver or you'll break somebody's sternum. Well, that first time that I skidded 25 years ago on the 101, I didn't know how to do it. And it was only by the grace of God that I didn't kill myself and kill other people too, because it could have been a horrific experience. I was ignorant of what to do. I'd heard that phrase, turn in the direction of the skid, but having never studied it or practiced it, I did the completely wrong thing at the time, but I vowed that day to learn what to do. And 2 Sundays ago, 25 years later, I got the chance to use what I'd learned and practiced, both automotively and spiritually. And I turned into the direction of the skid, but before I did that, I turned to that living presence within, God. And that gave me the strength and the confidence to do what I needed to do. And if you practice the presence of God in your life, it'll give you the strength to do what you have to do next too, because that's how it works. When you practice, you become proficient at it. So, all together now, how do you get to Carnegie Hall?
Practice, practice, practice.
Right, but you also have to turn into the skid, because Spirit knows its direction. Namaste. Thank you.